When you guys go to these people's sites, they're paying you to come and help solve problems. What are most people doing wrong on average when you're going and visiting with these people?
Yeah, I'll start. One of the main things that we always see, and we saw yesterday with our client down there in Ohio, is open, mature timber. We talk about it all the time, and it's the first thing on all the properties that we've done in the past 3 years. Get a forester in here, get a logger in here, make some money, have them do the heavy lifting, be safe, don't do it yourself, and just get some sunlight to the forest floor. That's number one.
Lights,
camera,
follow the trail.
ready to shoot.
If you know where a deer's bedding and you know where he's eating, that deer should be dead.
Camera.
If you're passive on a deer, what you're doing is you're teaching them.
I've got 30 bucks in the Michigan record book. Everyone but one has had at least one previous wound on his body. Some had as many as 4.
Trail Cam Radio from the guys at Exodus.
We're live, and I feel it's always strange coming in from the virtual standpoint, but I'm happy to be here, sorta, and happy to have Brian and Jared here in the office at Exodus. Thanks for coming over here. Or there.
Yeah, we missed you, buddy. Where you at?
I'm in Illinois. I'm working right here, but I guess we can thank technology we're able to do this. But it's tough to be in person. So, what brings you guys to town?
Well, we were about an hour and a half from here yesterday, cutting trees for a client, opening up his woods, and he wanted to, learn how to fell a tree, how to hinge cut, how to use the habitat hook. We talk about it all the time on the podcast, and he's like, just come down and show me if you don't mind. So we did. We cut 2 spots. One spot was on a knoll of a ridge, and to promote some bedding right there. And deer were in it 2 hours later when we got back from the second spot, so that was cool. And then the second spot, we were freeing up a bunch of apple trees over there?
Yeah, releasing a lot of apple trees. I think he said it used to be an old orchard, so there were 25-foot apples in there that kind of got overgrown, and was trying to get some sunlight to them.
Yeah, there were 25-foot apples, but they're 40-foot pin oaks and cherry, and they're in the shade, and the trees look like they were on their way out. So we laid a bunch of timber down yesterday, made a lot of noise. It was fun.
That is fun. Well, yeah, and I guess to introduce you guys a little bit here, last time we recorded in office, was that a year ago? Probably last.
About. I think we might
last
be a little
summer?
early on it.
Yeah, last summer,
June,
I think.
yeah.
June?
Oh, it was? Okay.
Yeah, we have Jared, an owner of Habitat Podcast. We have Brian, his co-host here. You guys have a lot of really cool things going on, and a great platform that has been really cool to see grow as have become familiar with what you guys are doing. So I'll give you guys an opportunity to kind of introduce yourselves in case people did not catch the last episode we did.
Sure. My name's Jared Van Hees. I'm owner of and host of Habitat Podcast. We are a podcast for the average guy, the landowner, the leasee, the public land hunter, to just better your knowledge on habitat management. We like to take people's properties, our properties, how it started, our own properties, and make them better for whitetail hunting. That's the main thing. And by design, everything else, benefits, upland birds, bugs, butterflies, bees, turkeys. But we like big deer. So it's kind of our thing, why we like doing it, to be completely honest. And yeah, so we're 170 something episodes in now. Been going for this will be year number 4, and having a great time. We also do some land plan services that we introduced a couple years ago, just to see if there was interest there, because we were getting some messages about it, and there has been, and we're busy with those too. Wife and kids as well, and just living the dream.
Yep, Brian Hallbly. I'm the co-host of the Habitat Podcast. Jared and I met through Quality Deer Management Association when it was named that back then, and sort of hit it off from there. I've been doing some form of habitat management for the last 20 years in Pennsylvania and Ohio. I'm sort of starting to figure it out now, finally. But yeah, like Jared said, we love to do it for all species. Concentrate on deer because we all like big deer. But appreciate Jared letting me hang around this long. We're pushing 200 episodes now, and it's been a lot of fun.
Ain't that something? 200 episodes in. I know, from one podcast to another podcast, you guys ever find yourselves digging or scratching for to keep things fresh or to keep things energized at all? It gets tough after a while, man.
It's a grind. And there's and you see that with all. If you watch other podcasts come to market and they go away, I'm too stubborn to go away. But it's it's a grind. I mean, late nights all the time.
Yeah. Too stubborn to quit. I like it.
Oh, that's exactly what I am. But to your point though, it's once a week. It's not just we hit the stop button on the record and goes and publishes itself and does all the social media work and everything, the YouTube. No, but it's our passion, and we're still doing it. So
springtime is when new podcasts come, and summertime is when they die. So
is that right?
I don't know. It's always like, oh man, these people they have a podcast now. They have a podcast now. They have this now. I don't know. You're an OG once you get to like 100 episodes. That's my opinion.
That's a good point.
Well, then we're in the realm of gangsters then right now, because you guys are killing it.
Cool. Yeah. Well, yeah. Thanks again for coming in. It's like I said, you guys are like an onion. You keep peeling back layers. The more I learn about you guys, I think the more kind of interesting takes and perspectives that you guys have, and talking to the variety of people that you do, you have a perspective that a lot of people probably don't, simply because by talking or recording 170 plus episodes, you just by default have talked to a lot of sharp people. So excited to talk to you guys, because by default, we're going to learn some stuff here today. But before we do that, how was your guys' past season? I think, I know, Jared, you had would you say your best year ever, especially in Michigan?
In Michigan, for sure. Yeah, I would say best year ever, because I missed the Giant in Illinois too. So if I would have had him, that would have been icing on the cake. Yeah, I had a great year. 2 mature Michigan whitetail off of my 15-acre parcel. I've owned that for 4 years, maybe 5. I think 5. And the plan is coming together. That one was mid-October, one was early November, a couple weeks apart. So I was blessed, very blessed, and the plan came together and it worked.
Yeah, twice. It worked twice.
Yeah. I don't know how much you want me to go into the details. We can dive all the way in, or we can.
Let's while we're talking about, let's go all the way into it. So you've owned it for 5 years, and we broke down that entire transaction and process, what it looks like on Land Podcast this past summer. And so, I think 15 acres is about as relatable as it gets, because that's not a large parcel, but to go into a highly pressured area or state and kill 2 mature bucks off 15 acres, you got something figured out.
Oh, thank you. No, I hope I do, at least. I mean, it was a lot in the making. I feel like if you can hunt our schizophrenic Michigan deer, you're doing something, or at least learning. This piece was just a basic piece next to another 5-acre chunk that I'm still trying to get the owner to sell me, but he won't, with like a rundown house and a collapsing barn and trash everywhere. And it just, 5 years ago, I didn't know what I know now. It's kind of a risk, but it was affordable and I could do it. And I bought it. I killed a 10-point that first year off it, and then spent 3 years passing and doing habitat work and watching my stuff mature and grow, the trees and the shrubs and everything come up. But the main thing that I think I learned the most of, and that's even talking to Chad and you, Jake, we talked about annual trail camera data. You guys talk about it all the time. I had like 3 years in a row. Those 3 years I didn't kill a buck down there. It's like October 15th or 16th. And we were doing a camping trip with the kids for Halloween, or we're doing something different that weekend. It's a lull, right? So I didn't hunt. I just let it sit. Kept the pressure off it. And, sure enough, there's a picture of a mature buck daylighting each year. I'm like, well, I'm not missing it this year. But on the calendar in like January, I'm hunting mid-October. It's on there. Calendar's a big deal at our house, right? So
you got to fill it up first.
Oh yeah, I get them all in, and otherwise you lose.
That's right.
And so I got it in there, and was actually kind of came on a cold front this year, which was nice. Friday night would have been pretty spectacular. I didn't make it out till Saturday night, and I set a low pressure stand, probably 75 yards from where I parked my truck, and right on the edge. And I right at last light, I saw a bunch of deer that night. I think I saw like 17 on the 15 acres, a couple bucks, and one nice one right at dark. He came out. I could hear him shredding a tree, and he came out to the food plot about 85 yards away. So the next night, Sunday night, it warmed way up. It was like in the 60s that day. I almost just threw in the towel, waited for another cold front. I went out there though, and I grabbed my saddle and went up a tree, back towards where that buck came out of, and first time stepping foot back there. Like, I don't step foot on my property unless it's on the way to a tree stand. And I mean, don't step a foot. Like, I don't go check cameras. They're all cell. Or if I can get to them, it'll be a rainy day if they're not cell. And then I take my access path and I walk out, and I don't walk through the food plot, none of that stuff. So I'm breaking my way back into this tree, compromising some ground as I do that. And saw a bunch of deer that night as well. Saw some deer sparring. And guys, this is Michigan. Like, when you see deer sparring, that's cool to me. I don't get to see that very often. I mean, there were little bucks, a spike and a fork or something, but it's cool stuff. They had a 2-year-old 8-point come by. This is October 17th. And right at last light, I hear deer coming from multiple directions. I'm like, oh boy, in the saddle, you got which way you're gonna go. So there's all that whole show going on in my head. And out steps this buck. Came right through this little kill plot I made and worked a mock scrape on an autumn olive bush. He had like 3 of them there. And I shot him right in that scrape. That afflictor blew right through him, right into the dirt. And he ran out in front of me and eventually made his way around me to where his bed was in a treetop from the logging I did the year before, or I had done, which was awesome, and died right there. I snuck out after I sat there for an hour. I snuck out and came back the next morning. I'm a big proponent of that too. 200-pound dress, 9-point. It went about 130, awesome. And I was jacked. I mean, October 17th. I haven't killed one that early in a long time. Moving right along after that, I went to Ohio with Brian on our lease down there, screwed around there for a few days, and insulated the sea container, our camp down there. It was pretty cold at night. And then left to come home. I was getting some more camera intel, again with the cameras.
He's like, I got to go because I got 2 days worth of pictures of a buck showing up. I said, get out of here. There's nothing going on here.
If a render tells you to get home, you get home, right? Yeah. So I'm sitting there, and this buck I've never seen before showed up twice, and I don't have a property where I get to watch them grow. I don't have deer from the year before half the time even. It's more of just a funnel, big funnel. And there's some deer there that come in and they go year to year. Like right now, there's not very many deer there at all. But this one was there, and he was nice. And I thought, okay, well, at least they're on their feet in Michigan. I'm going to go home. It wasn't happening for me in Ohio with the lease. So I drove home. I drove straight to the property, actually. Doing like a scent bath in the car, going 80 down the highway, that sort of thing. Smart moves. And climb up the tree. And I went back to that low pressure stand that I started in the first night back on the 16th of October. I had a good scrape there. And it was like 4 o'clock, November 4th, sunny. Wind was out of the west. And I see a 2-year-old working a scrape across the other side. I'm like, that's a good sign. And then, what do you know, I look up to my left, and kind of where that first buck entered the food plot at last light in my first story, I see this buck working up my trail by that other saddle stand I killed the first one out of. And he peeks in the food plot. And he's nice. Tall, mass. For Michigan, very nice. I'm like, holy cow, it's like 5 p.m. And he looked out. He saw there were no deer there. And he turned around and walked away. And that goes back to the habitat stuff that we always talk about. You don't want a wide open food plot because they can just check it and move on. So this wasn't a very big plot, and he did just that. He checked it and moved on. But I have a whole other plot that he couldn't see further past his view, so which would be to the east at that point. So he came from the west. He's looking east. He saw nothing, but I have a barrier there where he needed to see further east. So he turned around. He walked away. I grunted. I snort wheezed. He looked a couple times, shook it off, and he went up to the neighbors. So I was like, all right, well, should have sat that other stand. That was a great buck. Snort wheeze. Maybe he's not the king of the area because I know there's a big 8-point in there. Well, he comes around about an hour later and came in from the east now, the roadside. And I peeked out and saw him, and he was coming right through my food plot. He stopped and had a few bites of food, and then he came. I have a mock scrape right in front of me, and he came right towards that scrape. I narrow it down with this like wall of an annual cover, like sorghum, Egyptian wheat, that sort of thing. I kind of have it pinched down right to my stand. It's kind of stuff that Brian and I always talk about and love doing. Followed it to a T. Walked right down it. I had my camera on the scrape. I'm like, he's going to hit that scrape, shoot him right there. Drew back. He ignored the scrape, walked right by it. I'm like, mer, mer, mer. Wouldn't stop. Shot him on the move. That was the first. Hit him in the liver because I did that. And he ran about 70 yards and, again, had a tough time standing up and went down right there. And I let him lay overnight with the liver again and came back the next morning. He was laying right where I left him. So that was about, I didn't measure him yet. He's probably about a 139 point as well. He's just real different. He's tall. He's massive. The other one was real wide and standard. So I was tagged out in Michigan by November 4th, which doesn't happen often. And I'm not saying that to brag. I'm just proud and excited and happy about it because that was fun. And I want to do that again.
I don't blame you, really.
Yeah,
that's
that was
that's
awesome.
so cool. That's so cool to be able to do that. And I think you to have a plan come together so precisely 2 times is really cool. And I think that is a testament to that how like quote unquote tuned in you have that farm. So when you bought it 4 years ago or 5 years ago until now, what was there any changes that you made very recently that made you think one of the bigger differences? 'Cause like you said, it sounded like you hadn't killed anything for that on that farm for 3 years. And this past year, you shot 2 big bucks off of it.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that a lot, Jake. I think getting the soil to where it needs to be so your food is quality and not just there. There's a big difference in that if you really dive into soil health and all that stuff. Um, we had good rain, so everything was flush and green and pretty, everything came up. But I think the main thing was all the stuff that we implement, it takes years to grow in and fill in, right? So a shrub might only be a foot tall year 1 or year 2, and then year 5, you see it look good. I had a lot of that going on. So a lot of the trees were bigger. A lot of my cover is king, and it was there too. A lot of that was filling in, and I think that is really what made it happen. I hadn't seen that second buck on camera at all, so he was cruising. But I got neighbors that hunt my north border. I got neighbors that hunt my south border, and 15 acres that's long and skinny. It's what 330 feet wide, not very big. So yeah, that dealing with it's just about learning the farm, being precise, and then I think the habitat plan filling in over time. Because a lot of guys are worried about cutting their woods, or they're worried about putting in switchgrass because it takes 3 years to get there. Well, year 3 on, you're looking pretty good, right?
Right.
So
How do you handle people hunting your north and south boundary? Are you doing anything on your side of the fence to deter deer traffic to go west and east, or you leave it the way it is, or what strategy is there to mitigate? I guess any. I don't know. I guess no one really likes people sitting on the fence. So how do you handle that?
yeah, there's a couple of different things we can do. Habitat wise, we can plant things, we can hinge cut, we can literally block them off with things. Um, my one neighbor lets me access through his cow pasture, so I don't have to walk down my property or through my property on a southern wind. So I kind of don't mess with him. Um, and the other guy to the south, the way I see it, they are probably not as detailed or careful as I am. I try to be extremely careful in terms of where I leave my boot scent when I hunt, where my wind blows when I'm hunting or not hunting. Where I'm almost positive they do not consider that. So I think they kind of help themselves out in that way, or help me out,
Yeah.
if you want, and keep the pressure on their farm going, and I just stay out until the time to strike. You can go cut trees and lay them down in front of them, and then you start getting calls. Hey, what do you do that for? Blah blah blah. I want to keep good connections going and keep good relationships with the neighbors. But yeah, it's an issue for sure.
Yeah. Well, and I know people that have larger parcels too, and they still complain about neighbors. Whether you have 15 or 1,500 acres, seems like everyone's complaining about the neighbors. So I think that probably comes somewhat from, like you said, still being a good neighbor and, I guess look in the other direction or just make sure, handle it at the best of your ability. But everyone complains about neighbors no matter what.
Well, this guy who we're talking about, who I try to be nice to, I've had his dog running through both those scrapes. I shot those deer in probably 3 times between October 1st and November 1st. It's really hard
That's
to be
tough.
nice when that happens, and I just kept, your dog's out, your dog's out, your dog's out, and a lot of people handle that differently, but amazingly, it didn't really screw up the deer too bad. So I was happy about that. You put all this work in all year long, and then somebody's dog just comes running through during prime time. It's frustrating.
Yeah, definitely, to say the least. Well, that's interesting. So I guess it sounds like for the most part, it's just taking, harvesting those dividends after putting in work for the last 4 years of getting those plants and everything ready and established. And now the place is really seems like it's harnessed a lot more potential than initially.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And hopefully more to come.
Yeah. Do you think what else could you do to make it better, or is it plug and play?
That's a good question. I could add more mass trees. I just don't have room. Could add more food. Just don't have room. I cut the timber real hard already. That needs to grow up more, so more time will let that regenerate and come up with some early successional habitat because it's not all there yet. Fill in just more time really on this piece, and the neighbors move away. That would help too.
They disappear. Yeah. Okay. Brian, how was your season? I know you grinded hard. I followed along, and you ran all over. What's the recap?
Yeah, so we started hunting this lease for the first time. So a lot of big learning curve. Spent a lot of time over the summer trying to get as much habitat work done as we could. People probably heard me talk about it a million times. The landowner's been very generous with letting us make changes as long as we don't mess up any of his valuable timber. So there's a couple of power lines that run through there and a few gas lines that already have natural openings that the deer are sort of relating to in those transition areas. So that makes it easy for us to make changes to adding food without screwing up, too much of the habitat. It seems like the south end of that lease, from what we learned from camera data, is holding a lot of our bigger bucks. There's a big stretch of timber and gas company property that doesn't allow hunting. And we found out this year by accident that the neighbor doesn't allow any hunting. Actually had a deer hit one of the guys on our lease hit a pretty nice deer, and we went and knocked on the door, and they weren't happy at first, but once we kind of explained to them, listen, we weren't going to step foot on your property without talking to you. That's
Right.
why we're at your front door, and we just don't want a dead deer laying back there stinking or whatever. And they changed their attitude, and we ended up getting a card and a gift card and thanking them for letting us come on there. So, but we got a lot of intel, which was interesting. But yeah, I sort of went all in at the Ohio lease. My Pennsylvania hunting around home sort of suffered for it. Had some really close encounters. I mean, there was one morning in November, I think it was around the 7th maybe, where just this tank came out of this neighbor's property that we're talking about. It's just a big sanctuary over there. A lot of multiflora rows, thick, nasty cover. And just to have that buck at 30 yards was super exciting. I just needed him to take another 10 steps and come into a window, but didn't work out for me. Two of the shooters that we thought were on the hit list, our friend Dave and Chris harvested beautiful bucks. We're trying to keep it a 140 minimum just because it's Muskingum County and we know it's there. But they come up a little bit short, and not to take anything away from anybody. They were excited. We were excited for them. I think Dave beat himself up a little bit. He's like, we're trying to do something down here with 140s. And I respect that. But, beautiful bucks, hard to pass up.
Yeah.
And fun to see some success on the first year down there. But I ended up taking a doe early off of the alfalfa field that I planted in one of the power lines. Got to try out the new afflictors. I think that doe died within 30 yards, 40 yards. There's a video of it on our YouTube channel. Yeah, just struggled trying to get in front. I saw a lot of good bucks trying to move around and pinpoint. I think it was just, like I said, the learning curve of figuring out how they like to move on that property. So, yeah, looking forward to next year and putting all that information to work.
And you've done quite a bit of stuff over the last, let's call it 15, 20 years in Ohio. I mean, I know you reside in PA, but you're relatively close to Ohio. You've done some stuff in Trumbull County, which that's kind of where we're sitting now. How would you compare? I know like everybody thinks Ohio is Ohio, but it's not really.
He wants you to say it's bad.
Like it's not really the case.
Right.
But how would you compare like Muskingum, Trumbull, and some of the other areas that you've hunted over the years in Ohio? Like, do you have a favorite? Is there any big noticeable differences?
Yeah, being from Pennsylvania with that rolling terrain, some of it's steeper hill country. I sort of like that. Preferred, like my last 40 was in Ashtabula, which was real close to the Trumbull County line. Just dead flat.
Yep. Tougher
to predict. Had to do put a lot more effort in to try to get those deer to commit to a pattern. And I love that country, though. I love flat farm country. It's beautiful. But I think I like the rolling terrain a little bit better.
Mm-hmm.
Muskingum, where we're at, has a little more of that. Our previous lease was in Carroll County, so that had a lot of rolling timber. And yeah, just prefer the rolling hills, I think.
Yeah. And you guys have that. So it's always cool when you're on a lease and they actually let you do kind of not what you want, but at least improve the parcel to where it's not just, I don't know. I have a lease where you can't really do anything, and it's tough because it's like, you know what you need to do, but you can't do it. And then so you're just kind of rolling with what you can. So when you guys are looking to get a lease, how important is it on the front end of the conversation that you guys have the opportunity to do a lot of the habitat things that you guys, like to practice and do?
Yeah, I think it's pretty important. I mean, we're trying to always not only have a place to practice our craft, but to produce content, obviously, for the situation that we're in. So, yeah, I put that up there pretty high. We do know a lot of friends that have leases, like you said, Jake. They're not allowed to touch anything, so that would make it difficult for us. But if it's the right lease, I guess you kind of have to put up with that a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. And it's all it's all ebb and flow, and there's pros and cons to both, I suppose. But I mean, besides that too, how long do you guys have that lease? Is it something that's year to year? Did you guys lock it up for a long time? Because obviously you guys have, one thing that I think is tough is when it is year to year and you're making those improvements and investing, most importantly, your time. And then you have this, like your farm in Michigan, Jared, you have it tuned up in 4 years. You did all those improvements. And then it's like, all right, well, when you're ready to reap the rewards, it could change hands. So is there any ways that you guys try to protect yourself from how you handle landowners and your long-term leases, or what's your strategy?
Yeah, so we have the philosophy of always trying to leave everything better than we found it, whether we own it, lease it, even public land. You can go out there and volunteer for state game lands and things like that to improve the habitat. So that's kind of our mentality. It's really not, you're not losing anything. You're actually leaving it better for the next guy. But this current lease, the owner lives out of state, and big part of his income is this lease, and we have a middleman, but it was related to us and made very clear that he'd like a long-term thing because his deer hunters are very important to him. So it's a pretty good situation as of now, but it could change, like you said, tomorrow. Who knows? Families get involved, if somebody passes away or changes hands, you never know. So you just have to kind of keep that attitude about it, that you're going to leave it better than you found it, and that's good enough for me.
Yeah, that's a really good perspective. But yeah, let's dive into something that I'm really excited to talk about with you guys, because you guys have talked to a ton of people. You have been to, how many states have you guys visited with your site visits now up at this point? I'm putting you on the spot.
Oh boy. Probably a half dozen or so. Virtually more from, where's your bear hunt? New Brunswick?
Yeah.
New Brunswick all the way to western Nebraska, down to Mississippi. So yeah, in person, I think we've done Michigan, Indiana, Ohio, PA, New York, West Virginia, Mississippi. I think that might be it.
Pretty good
I think it might be.
spectrum there. So when you guys go to these people's sites, they're paying you to come and help solve problems. That's ultimately what you guys are doing. You're problem solvers for the parcel to unleash the goals that they want. What are most people doing wrong on average when you're going and visiting with these people?
Yeah, I'll start. One of the main things that we always see, and we saw yesterday with our client down there in Ohio, is open timber, open, mature timber. We talk about it all the time, and it's the first thing on all the properties that we've done in the past 3 years. I think I've been on one where I said he didn't have to cut, and that's just one. Every other one, get a forester in here, get a logger in here, make some money, have them do the heavy lifting, be safe, don't do it yourself, and just get some sunlight to the forest floor. That's number one. Brian, what else you got?
Access. That's a huge thing that we always talk about. Pressure. See a lot of people, and they want to be comfortable. They've made this investment in their property. They want to have fun, get on their side by side and drive to their stand, or walk across an open field and through open timber, and expect the deer just to sit there and wait for them. And it's not going to happen. So we preach that access and pressure, number one.
Yeah, those are top two. That's what I was going to say if you didn't say it. So,
is that like on the access side? Even when folks are buying a rec piece, like maybe it's multi-use, right? Like they want to have fun, they want to use ATVs or dirt bikes or whatever the case is. Is it hard to communicate that point about comfort? Like, hey, you don't need to be, riding an ATV to your stand the first day of gun season is not conducive to your goals and what you're trying to do here in the whitetail season? Is that hard to communicate, or like, is there any barriers there?
There can be, but we start off our plans with going over the goals that our clients have. We say right off the bat, what is your goals for this property? Most of our clients that are calling us are saying it's a deer hunting property, and we'll do whatever it takes to have better deer hunting. And we're like, perfect, we can go full bore. Other people, they say, hey, I want to bring my grandkids out. I got this pond over here. They're going to ride dirt bikes over here, and we can kind of work with that, but they're not going to have the awesome deer hunting mecca that somebody else could if they just focused on that. So that's kind of how we handle that.
Sure, that makes sense.
Yeah, so to add a little more to that, Brian's exactly right. We'll build around that and just explain, hey, you're gonna miss out on some stuff here by doing this. And some people are okay with that. It's their goal. It's not part of their goal to be as obsessed as we are. So that's fine. They just want some better habitat. Maybe want to see more pheasants or whatever, and that's great. Just working with their goals is important. Yeah, you nail it.
So, okay, let's say, what are some ways people can actually improve their access? So I assume there's a variety of ways, whether it's actually their travel path or screening. What are some things that you often suggest when you're going over access with these folks?
Yeah, one of the first things I consider is to carve out a trail system on the border of your property. Does a couple things for you. Gives you infrastructure, which is valued if you're ever going to sell the place or even want to get around. Keeps your neighbors honest and lets you blow your wind anywhere but into your own property. So if you have a square piece and you cut all the way around it, no matter what wind, you're pretty good. That's normally where I go with that. There's other situations where there might be a railroad bed, like we saw yesterday, that cuts through a property with banks on both sides. Well, that hides your whole access right up the middle. It might also hide a buck's access, as a corridor. So you got to think about these things. Or maybe there's a big ditch. You walk up that ditch, or a creek bottom, or a ravine. Those are sort of some of the things we see in person that are more easy to see in person versus like a digital plan. But if we're just going like basic, I would say cut the border around your property and don't ever let your wind blow in there, period. Never.
So, okay, so when you're cutting that boundary or that road all the way around the square 40, let's say, are you screening the road on both sides? Or are you screening the road on one side? I mean, just give a couple examples so people can maybe picture it in their head.
Sure. So it depends where you're at. But yeah, I screen the heck out of it. Or you can, if you don't want to screen right up to the edge, you can leave a void of open timber until the cover you're creating. Deer won't hang out in the open timber by your access path for very long or get busted too many times. So you can leave that as a deterrent for them. The wide open park effect woods we talk about that we want to get rid of, we can leave it sometimes to make your access okay. Otherwise, yeah, screen with hinge cutting, switchgrass, miscanthus, other trees, shrubs, whatever you can do. Like my Michigan farm is screened pretty hard on the whole south side. The north side is a swamp up there. I can't really get through there, so I just don't access it that way. Just stay out.
Interesting. What do you think in terms of, there seems to be, I don't know how to say, but I guess switchgrass is one thought, and miscanthus is another thought for screening. What's your guys' philosophy of when is proper to use and in which scenario when it comes to screening these roads, for example?
Yeah, it depends on your situation. Say you have an open cornfield that's cut. You're going to screen that differently than a block of timber, obviously. You're going to use switchgrass or miscanthus or Egyptian weed or anything that's going to be tall and fast growing for you. If your access is along timber, you can hinge cut. You can clear cut it so it grows up thick in the early successional growth. So it just depends on the situation that you have.
Yeah, you don't want to try to take a piece of timber and clear out a lane for switchgrass and try to put the switchgrass in the timber. You can. It's just you're fighting Mother Nature at that point.
Got it. And so when you guys are hinging for screens, are you guys hinging at a different height than normal, or just the typical height that you typically would, hinge cut for best practice?
Yeah, that'd be your knee level hinge cut. It'd be like a barricade cut, we call that. that will promote a blockade, and where as a higher shoulder type cut, for those who are safe and can do that, you need to that's more promotes bedding. Deer is a lot shorter than we are, so our knee may not seem very tall, but to them it's a pretty good barricade. So then you would just lay it parallel with your access path. Where if we're creating edge feathering along a food plot or in a woods to promote more growth and you want deer to come through, you do that perpendicular to the field edge or something. So yeah, there's a few different ways hinge cutting works, but for your barricade would be knee high, parallel to your path.
Got it. I think that's helpful because I think it almost seems everyone can agree on having roads all the way around your farm. That seems to be a common practice, but that's easy to understand. But I guess how to actually screen it to where it's useful and you're not, I don't know, getting seen on whatever direction too on all ways. Access obviously seems to be a big one. And then what about pressure? So as you guys are planning stands and things of that nature, how do you guys help someone lay out a effective plan?
Yeah, so one last thing on access before we go to pressure, and it kind of covers both. Timing's huge for access also, not just creating screens and everything. Like if you have a doe bedding area in the center of your property, and we tell clients stay out of there, until the right time. Obviously, you want to dive in there when the bucks are checking that, and that's okay to take those risks, risk reward, right? That's what we're always balancing. So that's important to remember too. Sometimes with the access, it's season time dependent too.
Yeah, good thought. Yep.
And to pressure, I mean, you kind of nailed it right there as well. A lot of our stands for like early season or mid October, be more your standard observation on the outside, safe setups, and then we have stands for the better time of year that you dive into, like Brian's saying, but you wait till that time of year to dive in. So we have what we call just regular stands and pre-rut stands, or rut. It can both work, but you're giving up something at that time. Your boot set on the ground for the next 48 hours, whatever that could be. You only have so many times where that's going to stay good and healthy for you. So we have that created on our map a little bit differently with like a dotted access versus solid, where, okay, you can do that. Just when you do it, know that you're giving up something, you're going to lose something, but you should go kill that buck that day. So it's worth trying. And those would be more internal stands, in the cover in the center of the property, unless there's like on my 15, for some reason, I have a funnel right up by the road. You can see every car that drives by and see what they're having for lunch or whatever, but there's a heck of a funnel there. And that is kind of just an exception where it's a rut stand close to the road. It's bulletproof, really. So it all depends, but the main thing would be kind of safety on the outside first and dive in for the kill when it's ready.
Mm-hmm.
Standard stuff. I mean, you guys, that's not much different than a lot of things.
Not really related to access, but something that just popped into my mind. After you guys are on the client visits, you draw your plan up, things start to get executed. From you guys' experience, how long is it taking to kind of really dial in like these stand locations? I mean, I think all of us could probably sit on the map and say, okay, this is going to be a good spot, but you might not necessarily pick the tree that first year. So what are you guys seeing on that?
Right.
Yeah, so that's one of the things we cover with our clients. Mm-hmm. And when we get the map finished and we say, listen, some of this is going to be fluid. These stand locations is where, based on our experience, where we think is the best place to intercept these deer doing this, but you might have to shift it 30 yards, 50 yards this way. So you're right, to your point, it could take a year or two to figure out how those deer are relating to the habitat changes that you're making, because that's the thing. They might have a way that they're using the property prior to all these changes, but they're going to start relating to it completely different once that's all in place.
Yeah, definitely. I think I'm with you on that. I think, for instance, on the Michigan farm, I have one stand that I haven't moved in 5 years. That's where I killed the second buck out of, but it's the only deer I've ever shot out of that stand. And then the one I shot my first deer out of, I only moved 15 yards to the north.
Yeah.
And it gave me an opportunity. Now, if I was in the other stand, would I still have been able to shoot him? I don't know. But a little bit of an adjustment, like you're saying, it took a few years to understand. Maybe I should be over here a little bit. And the loggers created a nice trail over there, so I kind of shifted. Like Brian said, even our whole plan, we say, things might not be exact unless we're on the property. On the property, you can, mark trees and tie ribbon or whatever you want to do out there. Like yesterday, we pointed Mike to a big oak and said, that's your spot. But like you said on the map, it's kind of like fluid more so.
Right. Going back to the access stuff where you have kind of your perimeter hunts kind of laid out and then your dotted lines back into the cover stuff that's more sensitive to pressure. When are guys hanging those stands? Are those hanging hunts for your clients, or are they hung in the spring? All your trimming, all the work is done. They're ready to go when the time's right. Like, or are you guys seeing a little bit of both?
It depends. We keep saying that. It's not what everybody wants to hear, and it's probably annoying. But like us three would probably walk in with a stand on our back or a saddle when the time is right, which we do. I know you.
And
guys,
we
I
suggest
know you do
that to guys that are open to it.
Stay mobile. But if you want to go set it up ahead of time and not touch it, I mean not touch it. Keep saying that. That's go ahead and do that.
Yeah. Is there a percentage wise of like what more clients are leaning towards?
I don't think the majority of them saddle hunt or are as mobile.
Really?
I don't think so.
Yeah, it goes back to that comfort level. Like I said, they have the property now and the side by side, and it's kind of like, I got this stand here, and I see a lot of deer out of it. So I think most of them are leaning more towards that, having the permanent stands.
Okay.
Yeah. Then again, the guy in Indiana we just saw, Ryan. He's all in. He's like, I'll pop around wherever. And that's where keep the deer guessing. If you're gonna hang a permanent set, don't hunt it more than once or twice. Right. And this is all stuff we had to learn the hard way. We grew up hanging hang-ons on the side of a beanpole tree, right? We've all been there.
And Jake, you do both, man. I don't like, we get through the fall and Jake's like, I'm hanging tree stands. I'm doing this. It seems like how many stands do you hang in the fall that you actually never get back to and hunt because it's just not right, and then you end up hanging, banging, boom.
Well, he's got so much land now. He's got
he's
hundreds of acres.
Nah, don't let him fool you. I don't know. I probably hang it throughout the fall. Probably on average, I probably move around 15 sets. Pretty conservatively, and a lot of those I hunt maybe once or twice. I hunt it once or twice. I'm like, this is garbage. It's not going to work. But then I still think, well, maybe these same conditions. The reason why I hung it, I'll hang a camera here and see if it makes sense. And really, what that's just provided is more learning opportunities, and hopefully down the road I'll be a little bit more effective. But right now, it's a spray and pray shotgun approach.
Well, you're in the stage of learning the farm, right? So I think you're doing it right.
Well, that's good to hear. Yeah, I think it's interesting though. Like you said, I think it's easy to fall into those comforts where this spot's always. Everyone. I'm sure you talk to clients where my uncle or whatever shot a giant deer here in 1995 in this stand on this ridge, and okay, that's long gone. And so, do you ever have to battle that where you're telling clients like they're saying this was a great spot, however many years ago, and they're still hunting it religiously when the other part of the farm clearly has more sign, or people pretty open to suggestions?
I would say pretty open to suggestions. If you get somebody who's gonna actually dial you up and have you out, they're pretty bought into the program at that point. They want to learn, they want to better what they're doing, so they already probably figure what they're doing isn't working or needs help or whatever it could be. But yeah, we've seen those situations where, hey, this ridge is killer every year, and hey, it could be, right? Deer use the same spots over and over again. Check out that old wooden tree stand that's been there for 30 years. Why was that there? Just pieces of the puzzle. But a lot of the guys are pretty open to what we suggest. Now, what they do after we're gone, I don't know if they sit in that old stand or not. So
we see a little of it generational too. Like the father owned the property, and now the son calls us in. And the father's like, I'm not doing that. I'm not changing that. This is where I hunt. So it can be a generational thing too, that they're just not going to change their ways. But we try to plan for that too. Like, hey, let your dad keep hunting that. Let grandpa keep going where he wants to go, and we'll figure something out.
Build a plan around it. Because the deer know grandpa hunts there every day shotgun season too. So
with the lit cigar,
Yeah, absolutely, for good luck. But I think the most interesting thing, and it seems that cutting timber more aggressively is becoming more accepted as well, even from the last couple of years, or maybe I'm just becoming more aware of it. Would you guys agree with that? That it's catching, I guess, more attention in the last 2 or 3 years?
Yeah, for sure. I haven't been to Jake Ehlinger's farm, but I've seen pictures and videos, And Jared's been there, and he'll tell you, and we tell our clients all the time, you can't cut enough. I mean, if it's rabbit habitat, that's what you want. You want these things being able to hide everywhere that they possibly can on your property. And that's even tough for us to get through our mind sometimes, even on our own properties that we manage, because it's just, you can't really cut enough. You just can't.
Yeah, and to add on to that, I think it's situational too. Like in Michigan, cut more, right? Like in Illinois, maybe you just can leave a draw alone and the bucks will bed in there. But if you cut it, it would be better. So I'd still say across the board, cut more. But some guys might not have to and still do okay. But like Michigan, when those guys cut who've been doing it for a long, long time, there's not a tree left standing. They're all down.
Yeah.
How long does it take to start reaping some of those rewards? I know you guys said you just did a cut and there was deer in there, but I guess like you said, it's taking time for that early successional growth to take over. What kind of, and I'm sure it's also relative if you're in Michigan or Kentucky, but what are some rule of thumbs that people can say, okay, well, I did this really hard cut and can I expect in 3 years it's going to be really great? 2 years, 1 year, 5 years? Is there a peak time in your guys' opinion?
Great question. I won't say it this time. It won't depend. It depends where you're at. So hinge cutting, instant cover, instant side cover. The moment the tree drops, the deer were in there last night. 2 hours after we were there, eating the buds coming off the maples and the cherries. Or if you have wet ground, like my 8 acres in the back of my 15 is very wet. That regen is taking forever compared to, a real high dry soil. That'll be 2 years. You'll be up 6, 7, 8 feet. And it depends on the species. Northern Michigan, there's a bunch of aspen. That'll shoot up very quick. Oak regen, a lot slower. But normally, for generalities, you open the canopy hard, the briars or the ragweed, everything will come in there within. You're usually looking pretty good at year 2. Year 1's a little empty unless you're hinge cutting, then you get it instant. That's why we can do some of both. Drop a bunch of trees, open the canopy, like very open, and then you can hinge cut different pockets too to get that immediate cover. Maybe some of the junkier trees or the smaller trees, that'll take a hinge better.
Are you guys planning anything as you guys do those hard cuts in open timber? Are you planting plugs? Are you doing anything to control what comes back, or are you just letting it do its thing?
Mother Nature does a great job on what's in there. The only exception to that I'll be doing this year, I'll be loading acorns, a ton of acorns, right before the loggers come in on the Northern Michigan property. That way, when they come in and knock all their trees down and leave all the tops on the ground for more cover, it's also going to protect the oak regen from being nipped off and browsed on for the next 5 years. Hopefully, they'll get up above a deer's level to where they can damage it too bad. So that's something you can do, is you can plant nuts before a harvest, or you can go in after and you can plant fruit or mash trees in and among the tops where the deer won't go so easily. That's my experience with it. What about you, Brian?
Yeah, you mentioned it with depending on what species or what's in your seed bank already. You got to be careful if you have a lot of invasives on your property, bush honeysuckle, autumn olive. Keep an eye on that stuff. Once you get that sunlight in there, if you see that stuff taking off, you got to deal with it. But there's ways to handle that, early spraying or planting some spruce in there or different pockets of things. But back to your point about, when you're going to see results, there's been spots that I've cut. If you've got the right stuff in there, blackberries, things like that grow quickly. If you cut it early enough, even that first spring, it's going to fill in really quickly. So, and we like to try to have those rotated if we get a client that we can do wildlife cuts and rotate them, about 5 years you're going to get out of it. And Steve Shirk has talked about it with you guys with the bigger clear cuts that he deals with. That 1 to 5 year period, and then you want to start rotating back through all that too.
I was just going to bring that up. That's like when we're talking about clear cuts on public, mostly hardwoods, a lot of oaks. Yeah. It's year 2, year 3 seems to like peak attraction. Yep. And then after year 5, like everything gets so high, so thick, and then it starts just to tail off.
How do you guys balance, a thick, nasty mess and it being quite literally impassable for wildlife, meaning, they fall on top of each other, or you guys, as you're doing that, trying to make your best to where deer and wildlife are still able to navigate through it? And the reason I say that is I have a farm that some spots are impassable because it was cut heavily and it's just a mess, which might be good, might be bad. I don't know.
Yeah, what I do, I like to, after it's cut heavy, walk through it like you're the deer. It sounds kind of goofy, but walk through it with your chainsaw. Okay, I can not get through here. I can go around here. So go around, come through. Am I trapped? If I'm trapped, I want at least 2 to 3 ways through there. Get through there to the next spot. Look around. Am I trapped again? Cut me an access this way and this way. You don't just want a hallway where a predator can chase a deer down one way or trap them. I like the maze and pocket effect throughout the woods. But barricade and tornado zones, whatever you want to call them, impassable areas, we created that yesterday on the very top of the ridge and then made more bedding just off the tip of the ridge. So up top, we wanted it impassable. That's closer to the field edge. And then down the ridge a little bit, we made more of a passable bedding area where the landowner stand is closer to. And that way it'll funnel the deer around that barricade, but also keep them in some cover. So a couple ways to handle that.
Yeah, and that could be daunting. I can picture what you're talking about, Jake. Some properties you go on, it's like, you might have a 10-acre swath that looks like that. But you could be surprised how quickly, if you get 3 or 4 guys with chainsaws in there, you can open that stuff up pretty quickly.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's interesting. So one other thing too that I had kind of jotted down was you guys mentioned you don't want big food plots. So when you're visiting with clients, how often are you telling them to either A, move the food, or B, make it smaller with more obstructions?
So if you have a larger parcel where you can have a destination plot, we'll incorporate that also, but most of our clients have smaller properties. So we want to keep those food plots and food sources closer to cover because you're going to have more daylight movement, better opportunities to harvest mature bucks because they're going to stand up out of their beds and want to eat. So that's kind of how we try to focus on putting those in the right spot with the right cover and the right access, and you're golden.
Yep, and to add to that, well, if it is a big plot, and we'll have it broken up and compartmentalize it with switch, with tree or shrub plantings, whatever you got to do to break that sight line up. Like I talked about in my second buck, when he came out and saw, he knew that first area was clear, and that's only 1/8 of an acre or so. Then he came around the other side to check that other 1/8 of an acre. So I got a huge barrier right down the middle of it. Still fixing a mistake I made week one of the property when I bulldozed it all down and created a giant food plot. So,
And so I guess for everyone listening, what in your mind is considered a big food plot? So they have a reference. And then number two, I guess, what is the threshold for what's considered a small parcel as well?
I would say big to me from Michigan, I would say big to me is an acre. An acre is huge to me. Seems weird to probably everybody in every other state, Illinois or Iowa. They're like, get out of here. But there is big. I'll make them down to a 1/16 of an acre in Michigan.
Yeah, and it depends on what you're planting too. Like you think, oh, I'll plant a 2-acre plot of soybeans. That could get wiped out pretty quick depending on your deer density. So it kind of depends. There's that depend answer again. But yeah, I mean, most of our kill plots we recommend are like 1/4 acre or smaller. That's what we try to keep it at. And you could shape them in a way, depending on the terrain, to get the deer closer as they're working through those smaller plots. That'll help you get a shot a lot closer and make better decisions for your shot making.
What's that term you didn't want us to say last time? Game changer?
Yes.
And now we're on to it depends.
Yes, it depends.
So, and then what is considered a small parcel? For anyone listening, when you guys are saying, if you have a smaller parcel, you're going to need probably some of these smaller plots. Is it 40, 60, 80, 100, 120? It depends.
I mean, we work on some we just did one in North Carolina. That's a state I missed. North Carolina, we did one that was 9
That's
acres,
right.
9 or 10. And that's probably the smallest we've done. But I would say small could be up to, 80. I'd say 120 again. Michigan's so broken up into small parcels. It's kind of a different view I have,
Right.
Scarred into my memory. So 120 in Michigan, I'm all over that. That's huge,
Right.
But out here and out west, it's nothing.
120 is big here too.
Is it? Okay,
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. At least in this county. I mean, I think in some other counties it's not.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah.
Like if you're talking holding deer, like a lot of people say, I want to have bucks bedding on my property. Well, that might not be possible depending on the place that it's at. I mean, you might need a square mile. You might need 640 acres to have a buck bedding on you, depending on the location. But I think maybe 100 acres is probably my threshold, because we work with so many smaller properties. So I think in my mind, if you have 100 acres or more, that's a pretty good sized piece of property.
And I suppose too, it depends on how diverse or what's the quality of the habitat on the parcel too. I mean, there's probably hundreds that hunt like they're 20, and there's 20s that probably hunt like they're 60. So, and that, I think that's really interesting. So I guess anything else that you guys see that is just glaringly obvious to you guys, but not to most people that you guys visit with on client visits or talk to for online consultations?
If you get your woods logged, leave the tops. Just have them take the money wood and leave the tops. I think that's, people like to go and see the clean woods and get firewood. And sure, it's your place, do what you want, but I would leave the tops. Back to your point about bedding, Brian, I never thought I'd get a deer to bed on the 15 acres because it's so small and skinny, but that buck was bedding in a treetop and died in his bed, and that's pretty cool to see. So I guess you can create the bed, but leave the tops. Big thing for me.
Yeah, I mean, there's clients we have, they could show you exactly where every one of their mature bucks beds on the property, but they can't tell you what bush this is or what tree this is. So the woodsmanship, it seems like it's becoming less and less important to hunters with, we've got food plots and trail cameras, and that's kind of what we focus on. And I think a lot of people, and it no fault of their own, it's just technology and the way that we've moved, but I'd like to see people spend more time learning, what the deer are eating, what they're browsing on, things like that.
Mm-hmm. Here's one other question too. So, for example, if the where I live, there's some bush honeysuckle that's trying to take over, is leeching on the neighbors on over, and then there's obviously a lot of the crappy cattle grass, and they say you should spray that in the fall so it can get down all the way to the root. And obviously, fall and hunting are kind of synonymous. Do you guys agree with that? Subscribe to that? Can you guys do the same type of work in the summer or the spring? What words of wisdom do you have?
I would agree with that. You want to kill. September is a great time. October, November, when those plants are taking the nutrients for the dormant season. Yeah, it's just a sacrifice you're gonna have to make. Unfortunately, it's like planting switchgrass. It's the same thing. You want to make sure your cool season grasses are dead. So you spray in the fall, or spray summer, and just it's dead throughout the fall. This black spot of wide openness that you wish was 6 foot tall cover, but you need to prep and keep the long range goal in mind of, okay, at least it's dead. Now my switchgrass, my main goal, will have a better chance of living. So yeah, you want to keep an eye on all that stuff. You can cut and dab with some herbicide, whatever you got to do, Jake. That stuff will get crazy. My friend Jordan in Illinois, his is the same way. He's got a lot of BH on it, a lot of Russian olive, autumn olive. Deer will bed in it and whatnot, and your neighbors are still going to have it once you kill it all, so it's an uphill battle. But
yeah, it'll always be happening when the birds eat the little berries, and
exactly.
Yeah, for sure. That's interesting, because I think that's probably something that, like you said, you have to have the long-term vision of what you're trying to accomplish and look past the right now, a little delayed gratification. So that's interesting. So you guys have traveled in a lot of different locations, and I always like to ask these folks, so you have a golden ticket and you have a free coupon for 40 acres. And where are you going to pick it? Why? I'll let whoever wants to go first have at it.
I would have to say probably Wyoming or Montana, just because I love that country out there. And there's still enough good whitetail habitat that you can access that I can get that fixed, because I don't think I could ever get over not chasing whitetails. And I've been blessed. I've been out west a bunch of times to hunt different critters, and I just love that country, that open. You could sit in the tree stand and see 200 deer coming out of the hills into the alfalfa fields. And I think that's probably what I would do.
That's pretty interesting.
That's cool. That's a good answer.
You just changed my mind. My wife went to school in Missoula for grad school, and there's just big whitetails walking around like rats out there. And
Isn't
nobody
that
hunts
something?
them. Yeah.
They think they're just like creatures of the ditch. Like no one cares, no value to them.
And there's muleys, and there's elk, and there's trout. Oh, man. Western Montana might be it. But I like the Midwest, too. I'd probably go... Would I live there or not live there?
You live where you're at, and you got to travel. I'll say that.
Okay, then I'd probably go... Probably northern Missouri.
Why is that specifically?
Because Iowa, you get kind of gypped out of tags a little bit as a landowner, and northern Missouri, right on the Iowa border, is very similar. And you get at least one tag. You get two tags in Missouri, or no?
I'm not sure.
I don't know either. I never even hunted there, but I've hunted right across the border in Iowa, and it's phenomenal. Illinois is great too. We want to go there.
Man. We had that conversation.
Yeah, we
all
won't
the
even go there.
time.
So I mean, I love Illinois. Deer hunting is amazing, but man, put up with some stuff.
Tell me about it. No, that's where this is home, born and raised. That's interesting. I think northern Missouri. I think a lot of people subscribe to that same mental process of the habitat has to be pretty similar to southern Iowa. I mean, the deer don't know the boundary, and then obviously a much more favorable tag to get. And I would assume ground is probably cheaper in Missouri than it is even in Iowa, right across the border, for a variety of reasons. So I think you get a lot of value based off of that logic. That's pretty cool. So Wyoming and Missouri, interesting. Chad, have you answered this question yet? Where are you going? Where are you going and why?
Geez, oh man.
I'd go to Kansas after seeing that
Yeah,
buck hanging
I know
back
his
there.
answer. Yeah.
Nah, I don't. Kansas is nice. It would probably be. I'm a fan of Western Nebraska, out where you hunted,
Yeah.
just because I have some rodeo ties there. I like that.
Cool.
Still kind of get the openness. There's a ton of public land, so a 40 would fit really nice in there. A lot of opportunity to travel into Colorado, into Wyoming, into Montana to chase elk or muleys or do whatever. So without putting a ton of thought into it, I think Western Nebraska would kind of fit the bill.
Ground's pretty cheap there too.
Yep.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, well that's good. So one other question here I have for you guys, and it's I guess a little bit of a hard transition, but it lead into the next thing. But so I know you guys work with a nursery that sells grafted trees, and to me, I have almost zero experience in that. I take that back. I planted a bunch of grafted veneer trees for a different reason, but in your opinion, or I guess what you guys know, grafted versus the cheap ones you can get at the Soil and Conservation District, what value is there for a grafted versus just a regular old tree?
Yeah, and I'm not an expert in this field. I'm still learning here. I think they graft for better root stock. You can graft onto the 111 and just have better growth. You can graft all kinds of different fruits. And I assume are they more disease tolerant too? I'm not positive on that, but I think grafted is a little bit better. It costs more though. And with trees, I'm more of a guy who I want to plant them and I don't want to have to go manicure them all day long, because just knowing me, I won't do it. So I plant and hope for the best in terms of percentage. So I'd probably do a mix of both to diversify, but you can get the soil conservation ones for cheap, and then you have the grafted ones, and you got our nursery that we work with. One of our partners we're a dealer for. They sell chestnuts that'll drop in August, September, October, November. That's a pretty special tree. You're not going to get that at the Soil Conservation District. I don't think. Maybe you can.
I don't think so, because I've dove into that website and I've read all about the different varieties of oaks that they have and all the different pairs of when some drop in October, some drop in December, and obviously that seems attractive because you can plan your parcel based off of what's dropping and when. It's just it's an area that I have a lot of interest in to learn more about. So I was curious what you guys' opinion, but clearly when there's a patent on a tree, it makes me think that if it's something worth patenting, it has to have some level of benefit. And maybe that's a flaw of a thought, because I bought like 300 curly popular veneers that are all supposed to be veneers as they grow, as long as outside influences don't hinder it, versus other tree that would never have the potential to be a veneer. So there's some arborists listening right now and like, man, these guys are jokers, but that's okay.
Yeah, so the grafted varieties, they'll grow faster also, and they're more consistent. Like if you take a cutting off of an apple tree or take an apple and take a seed out of it, you're not guaranteed to have the same traits in that seed tree that the parent has. And with the grafting, they're able to control that better. And you can match the rootstock to your area too. Like a lot of the stuff you'll pick up at the big box stores, it's kind of a general all-purpose rootstock that they're using. So most people will have success with it, whereas with the grafted, you could fine-tune it for your soil type, your location, things like that.
Because I know on that website too, they talk about all these different oaks that can drop, in 5 or 6 years versus a traditional tree that might take 20 years. So obviously right there, that seems to be a pretty interesting benefit, like you mentioned.
Absolutely.
So, which leads into the next thing. So, who you guys have talked to a lot of different people. You guys eat, sleep, and live whitetail habitat. Who is on your Mount Rushmore of land managers or biologists that come to mind? Who wants to tackle it?
Yeah, so first I'm going to throw it to my buddy Eric Long, who's become a friend of mine. I was a client first on a 40-acre parcel I owned in Ashtabula County. He was kind enough to come up there, and I learned a ton from him, still do. I think he does a great job. He runs Drumming Log Wildlife, and he's been around a while. He's been in the game for 20-some years, I believe. He won a QDMA award way back when, and definitely him for sure. There's a fella from Iowa named Paul Knox. He passed away. Jared and I spent a lot of time communicating with him on the old QDMA forum before that was disbanded. But we actually became friends with his son, Jesse, and looking forward to doing some projects with him. I'm actually working on a field guide based on Paul's information. And he wouldn't just like tell you how to do something. He would show you. And he had experiments and tried all different kinds of things. And you can read all about it on iowawhitetail.com, I believe it is. They preserved his DoubleTree habitat corner. You can go on there. I learned so much from that guy over the last 15 years. And even since he's been gone, I'm still reading his experiments and things that he's done. Third guy would be Steve Bartilla. I've read every one of his books. He's always gracious if I send him an email to get right back to me with some answers. Really smart guy. He's killed a lot of giant bucks, helped, I don't know how many clients kill giant bucks. He's been on our podcast. Definitely have a space for him up there for sure. And I'm going to go with the old gangster, Ray Scott from Whitetail Institute, the old bass master. Back in the day when I started this, you could either buy seed from the local co-op or Whitetail Institute. And he was doing groundbreaking things with testing clovers and things way back. I think it was the late 80s he started that company. So I always thought he was an interesting guy. I actually ran into him at the airport one time, just like on a whim, and introduced myself, and super cool guy.
So when you said you're working on a field manual, is this going to be like a publication, download?
It's going to be a book format. I'm thinking like a spiral thing with some heavy duty paper, so you can throw it in your side by side, keep it in your barn, take it out and get it dirty. That's what Paul would want you to do for sure.
That's cool. I don't want you to disclose too much if you're not ready, but is there a timeline on when people can expect when that might be available?
Ooh, baby. Pressure's on now.
Yeah. We have it all laid out. His son was kind enough to do a forward for it, so I've got that all done. Kind of feeling out some publishers right now. So, boy, it'd be great to have it for Christmas, wouldn't it?
I'm going to buy one. I'll be customer number one. I'm excited. That's cool. So Eric Long, Paul Knox, Steve Bartilla, Ray Scott is the Mount Rushmore for Brian. Jared, who do you got over there?
So I have one that'll overlap, Steve Bartilla. Always been great to me and Brian and I. I love his posts. I love his humbleness. That guy's up there for me. Number 2 would be Dr. Craig Harper out of Tennessee. He's an OG as well. Just love the way he delivers and teaches when he talks and relates to you. It makes you feel like you're in his class with him as he's teaching. It's very cool. That's an obvious one. I'm gonna mind blank. I would say Jake Ehlinger out of Michigan. I followed him for a long time, and he really got my interest peaked. Probably his fault. I'm into this whole habitat thing. I don't know if he knows that or not, but I'd say Jake. He's been a pioneer in Michigan, no question. And then lastly, I'm going to go with my buddy Brian over here to the right. Brian Hallblay. Brian's been doing this for a long time. Look at how he just answered that grafted question, right? Where I am stumbling through it, a little bit newer to it. Brian's got a lot of knowledge up there. I've learned a ton from him. And I'd be lying if I said, he's not up on my Mount Rushmore with those guys.
Yeah, those are some good names and good explanations. That's really cool. That's all I had for written down. I mean, I really, like I said, I respect a lot of your guys' opinion. Like I said, it's a privilege to go and talk to a lot of different people, and then just kind of what that knowledge can get passed down and around. So Anything else? You guys want to plug what you guys have going on?
Sure. Yeah. Why not? As long as you don't mind.
Go for it.
HabitatPodcast.com. Everything can be seen there. All of our episodes. You can link to all of our media. You can see our land plan consulting things. You can see our blog up there. And I'd be silly not to mention we're starting a new seed company that's going to launch today as well. That's called Vitalize Seed. Right now today.
4/4/2022.
You haven't seen it yet because I'm here and not on my computer posting it. It'll be it's called vitalizeseed.com. That's the name of the brand. Going more after the soil health, the less fertilizer, less tillage, less herbicide. Which reminds me, I would put Grant Woods on that Mount Rushmore too. I think Dr. Grant Woods. I think he deserves it. He's a very smart guy. But yeah, that's what I have. HabitatPodcast.com. Brian does a heck of a job with the YouTube and the media as well. Check us out. We'd love to have you.
Cool. Awesome. Well, certainly appreciate your guys' time. Wish I was right there with you and be able to grab lunch, but good to catch up and encourage everyone to go check out what you guys have going on.